Hello and welcome, everybody. So my name is Stephen Fortuna, and this is the show where we bring together HR experts to break down some of the most fundamental topics in the industry. So our topic today is employee first days. And we have three amazing panelists here. As you can see, I'll introduce them now. We've got Lotus Buckner, who's the VP of People at Chowbus and founder and CEO at Talent Solutions. We have Brandon Butters, who's an HR manager at Vivint. And finally, we have Carol Fortune, head of HR at PEC. So great group here today. Excited to hear all of your insights on creating an amazing first day for employees. And I want to start out with what I actually consider to be one of the most important questions we're going to be asking, and get everyone's takes on it up front, because I really think this will kind of set some alignment and put people's kind of heads in the right space to have the rest of this conversation. And that question is, what are our high level goals for the first day? So I'm imagining that moment when they walk out of the office or they're closing their laptop and you want the employee to feel a certain way or know something or understand something they didn't come in with, they didn't have when they came in, or be different in some way. Let's tackle that together. I'd love to turn this over to Brandon first, and then just go around the table here in alphabetical. So Carol and then Lotus next.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Man, when it comes to onboarding and what I want my new hires to feel at the end of the day, so I'll start with the feeling. I want them to be excited, right? The excitement that they had in the interview about taking the job, I want them to be excited about the job that they just undertook. Feel it a failure if anybody's walking out on their first day going, what did I get myself into? I definitely want the people to feel connected to the culture and the values that we have here. That's incredibly important, is that they feel like not only a part of the team, but that they can relate to our culture and the values that we espouse. From a knowing perspective, I want my new hires to understand, one, who to contact for certain needs, and that can span HR, their management group, IT, all those different pieces, so they know where to go for help. That's huge. They should also know who their manager is and what are first day expectations with their manager around each and every one of those things. And then also a plan, right? What's next for them over this next week? And then as far as being, I want them to feel like they can be themselves. That's a huge part too. When we're making hiring decisions, we're bringing people on, we want our new hires to feel like they can be themselves. They don't have to disguise who they are, and that Vivint is a welcome place for each and every one of them. And those are my overarching goals whenever I have new hires start, is really connecting with the values, knowing what's next for them, who to go to, who to contact, and then also that they feel like they can be themselves here.
Yeah, love that, Brandon. Carol, what would you add?
Yeah, that's great, Brandon. You stole them all. So no, I think that it's important from the first day that employees feel seen. And that goes along with what Brandon was saying, that we don't just recognize, okay, your presence is here, and we shift you through all of these different programs and timelines and people, but who you are and what you came here for and what you came here with is valued, and it matters. And that they leave at the end of their first day feeling like they have been connected to the greater purpose of the organization and why they matter in that. And that's not easy to do. That's very difficult and requires intention. It requires strategy and conversations with the people that are involved in creating that experience. But at the end of the day, you want them to have a moment, at least one, where it's like, it's a memory. It's something in their mind they'll walk away and know they'll never forget. It's a story they'll tell to their friends over dinner or over drinks or whatever. They're just going to say, you're not going to believe what they did for me on my first day. You're not going to believe the experience I had on my first day. Yeah. And it's something that communicated to them how much that they matter.
Yeah. Creating a memory. I love that. Making them feel seen. This is great. Okay, Lotus, you got tough acts to follow here. Did Brandon or Carol leave anything out? What would you emphasize or add?
I would just emphasize, I think I agree with all of that. I really want employees to feel like when they come and join us, even on day one, that they have a community, that they're not just joining a workplace, but that they're joining an actual community where they feel they belong, where they feel supported and where they feel welcome. Because I think being new is nerve-wracking for most people. And for a lot of people, they're coming into their first day hesitant, like not knowing if they made the right decision. So I want them to leave at the end of the day feeling like they did make a good decision, the right decision, and that we've eased their worries and their concerns a little bit.
Yeah. That's awesome. Kind of random follow-up question here. I mean, do each of you remember each of your first days at new jobs? Like, I'm now having flashbacks to mine, but like I'm seeing nods here. Probably the most memorable day of work, maybe ever. Is that weird? Like, what is your guys' experience with first days, like personally?
I've always been an individual that's thought you've got one shot, one opportunity to make an impression. And if it isn't good on your first day, it sets, right, the journey for the rest of the employee's experience. But yeah, I can think back to my own times where it's gone really well and other times where it hasn't gone really well. One of the things that I remember actually specifically about Vivint that I loved is I knew coming on that I was coming into chaos. And that was matched with the meetings I was thrown into, but I loved it. That I would consider myself a chaos conqueror. And so for me, that resonated with kind of my values and who I am. But it was structured. It did have some structure to it. But I did bounce around from a couple locations because we have an office in Provo, an office in Lehi, Utah, respectively. And it was kind of funny to attend in one spot, then get in a car and go drive to another. But it's been great. And I think it really matters ultimately that you have new hire orientation according to your culture, like what you're trying to show people, because you don't want to have something fake and then they come on and they discover that that's not actually what their experience is like. And so I appreciate that Vivint, sometimes we're not always the most organized in the way we do things, but it's who we are, and we like people to know that.
Well, that's
I
fine.
very much appreciate that, Brandon, about the difference between having a program that's by default that just happens and then one that's actual by design, and people can feel a difference. And they absolutely know when it's something that there's been effort and thought put into it. When I came here, I actually don't have a lot of like memories. That's why memories are important to me, because I was struggling preparing for this, thinking about my first day experiences. I'm like, all of them were not memorable.
Yeah.
And the one I can remember was the most recent, which is, just over 2.5 years ago at the job that I'm in now. And the reason I remember it is because I was coming in as the head of HR, and the person who was onboarding me was, of course, someone that would be reporting to me. And it was 3 hours of paperwork, of printed paperwork with all of these things that I needed to. She was reading to me verbatim as a script. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to fix this. We can't do this. This can't be what people experience. 3 hours of HR being like, and then turn the page and select number 2. That's not the experience we want people to have.
Yeah. Yeah. You were coming in with a critical HR lens. That's why it was memorable, not because it was memorable for that reasons, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love this. I think we kind of have a good picture here of what we're trying to achieve with the first day. I want to start to get into a little bit of the specifics of how we make it happen. And I want to kick this one first over to you, Lotus. Scheduling. So you don't have a first day until you pick it, right? So like how are you picking the first day? Is there any importance to the day of the week or anything like that people should think about when they're scheduling with their new employee? What are kind of your thoughts and methodologies around picking that first day, putting it on the calendar?
Yeah, I don't think there's one size fits all. I think it depends on so many different factors. If I lived in a perfect world, everybody would only ever start on payroll Monday. But we don't live in a perfect world. And I think it depends on other things, right? Some candidates, they have to give notice to their employers for leadership roles that can be a whole month or more. They might have vacations planned, and the employer is going to have to decide if they can accommodate that or not. And that might be different than the start date that the employer had in mind. And then on the employer side, right, there's also challenges because you may also have needs as the employer or the hiring manager. Some roles are more urgent to fill than others. For example, if you have a team that's really well cross-trained and someone leaves, it may not hurt as bad and you might have more flexibility on the start date. But if you have a team where no one is cross-trained and somebody leaves, you're in a lot of pain, and you might need somebody who can jump in right away with some expertise and start immediately, or at least as immediately as possible, And so you might not have that same flexibility with somebody who needs to give a month's notice. So I
Mhm.
think it depends on a lot of factors, but those are some things that I would take into consideration.
Yeah. I think you basically laid all the variables out there that people need to think about. Really, like, yeah, lots of things to consider. Let's say we finally get that date on the calendar. So it's next week or a month out or whatever it may be. What would you be doing to help prepare the candidate or the new employee ahead of time? Again, prepping them for that first day so that they are going to feel ready for that. Carol and Brandon, I love both your thoughts on this. Maybe Carol first, and then Brandon can jump in.
Yeah, so we have a very kind of systematic process that it is followed for the most part, but it usually starts with once they have accepted that offer letter, there's kind of like, okay, it's go time for us. We're in our go mode and we have all these things we're stepping through. But the most important thing is that hiring manager usually reaches out with a phone call, like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And they share that enthusiasm of that, like, yes, here we go, because that's the moment where that starts, that energy is created. So they capture that, call them up, say, okay, here's what's to expect. You're going to get an email from HR. It's going to list out all the things you need to know for your first day. You're going to get some documents that you need to look through and work through before you start. That way, day one can be less paperwork, more connection. You know what I mean? So it's kind of setting the stage for what their first day is going to be like before they even have it. But there's the connection from the manager that's personal. And then there's the, kind of more formal documentation from HR.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Brandon, what would you add?
Not much more. Caroline did a great job. One of the things that I find really important is that first day email ahead of time, or phone call, or text, even whatever it may be, right? We live in a ever-changing world, and people like to be communicated in different ways. But I think it's important hearing from your manager and having them express like their excitement about you coming on. And that could even be done during the offer stage, right? Like if the manager's the one offering it out to the individual, talking about those first day expectations. One thing that I really appreciated, and I've always appreciated with a few companies that I've worked for, is not only did I get that reach out, but I got an email the night before, once again reiterating, like, we're super excited, and here is the schedule of events. Here are the things that's going to occur. And I know that was set up directly by my manager, who had meetings already set up for me, had me invited to meetings as well that I needed to be on. I think that's critical in identifying what does your employee need first day? Where do they need to go? Who do they need to talk to? If you're in a role where you're going to be in meetings more, what introductions need to be made before? And then making sure they're on like distro lists and things like that to ensure that they're already getting communications. When I came in my first day at Vivint, I already had like 5 or 6 inquiries on things that needed to get done. And people knew who to go to. So there was also a pre-introduction. So teams knew who I was even before I got there. So when I started, people came and introduced themselves to me knowing, hey, I knew you were starting today, really glad that you're here, and things like that as well. So not only informing the candidate that's now your employee, but also informing your team or the groups that they'll be supporting with before they get here I think is extremely helpful. And it makes you feel seen. It makes you feel like you're already a part of the team when people knew that you were coming on.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of great ideas there. It sounds like a lot too, though, to be honest. So we're sending emails, we're making a manager call, we're setting up meetings, and it sounds like a lot of this work is happening well before they start. The paperwork you mentioned, Carol, to get that out of the first day and put it beforehand. I'd love to hear thoughts on just like how do you keep yourself organized in like executing on all this stuff. Lotus, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, how do you keep yourself like accountable and making sure all this happens?
Well, so from an HR perspective, I would want to make sure that my onboarding team is ready to go and prepared for their new hires that are coming on board. When I worked at bigger companies, I mean, our orientation was like anywhere from a day to a week long at a big company. And so there's a lot of planning that goes into that from the HR side. As a hiring manager, though, I try to clear my calendar as much as possible for the first day so that I can meet with the new hire at the beginning of their day as well as the end of their day for check-ins, but also just be more available to them on their first day in case they have questions or something comes up. And then just preparing a lot of the things that Carol and Brandon mentioned that you prepare for the candidate is making sure that you have yourself organized about what it is they need on their first day, scheduling those meet and greets or introductions that they have, preparing checklists for them for their first couple weeks, scheduling any meetings, getting them included into like department meetings or company-wide meetings or anything that's kind of a recurring that they would need to be involved in, getting documents or items together that you'll want them to start reviewing as part of their learning and onboarding process. And like I said, I try to schedule a beginning of the day and end of the day. At the end of the day, I think it's important to see how things went and also get their feedback about what their experience has been so you can make adjustments in the future. And then also make sure that they're ready for the rest of the week and know what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're putting a lot of events on your own calendar. And anyways, yeah, I think we've got a good base of ideas here now that people can hopefully execute on. Another question that arises kind of as you have all been talking about kind of how important this is and you want to make memories and stuff. We talk to a lot of one-person HR teams who are maybe in companies that are scaling or not, but at what point do you consider bringing on additional people to help with this process? I assume that you're like a pretty big organization if you have somebody who's dedicated to onboarding, but I'll just open this question up to whoever might have experience on kind of bringing on additional people to manage onboarding specifically in HR. What does that look like?
So I'll start because when I started at PEC, this was kind of the start of not the start of HR, but it was kind of the start of a strategic HR, right? So HR had kind of been being done by various people within the organization. And what I loved about that was there were all these great ideas that I would never have thought of about how they treat new hires and what they do for them and how each kind of hiring manager or their team would celebrate in a different way. But when we started coming together and trying to formalize that, it was, wow, there's a resource here. This doesn't have to always be HR that's putting up the banner and the balloon for the new hire and making sure that their picture is loaded on the TV screen for them, or, you know what I mean? Making sure that all of these things are going to happen. It's being able to establish the responsible parties for that particular action item and saying it doesn't have to be HR. It can be the resources that are closest to that activity. And I think by doing that, it creates that sense of community that Lotus was talking about. It creates that from day one, everybody's kind of got their hands in it and buy-in and involved in creating that experience for the new hire.
Yeah, that's really cool. I want to dive into this a little bit, but actually kind of make it a bigger question. Because like you said, like you don't always need more HR resources. Maybe you just need to involve more of the organization to greet. And that was kind of a big question for me. So how much of this process is HR and how much of it is, bringing in the hiring manager and some other people? And I'm specifically thinking to like the first day they're walking into the building, right? Like imagining that moment. Are they being greeted by HR first and kind of being whisked away? Are they meeting their hiring manager? But sorry, kind of the broader question here is, what is that breakdown between what HR does and what the rest of the organization you just organized to do? Brandon and Lotus, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's what vision do you want the employee to have, right? If you have an HR group that is highly involved and they're strategic and this employee is going to be interfacing a lot with HR in your company because of how HR operates, then I don't think there's anything wrong with HR being involved on the first day in being there and being present and introducing themselves because they can be a contact. But if you'd rather that they're meeting people in the organization, people they're going to be working with and interfacing with, then there should be a new hire buddy. You can call it what you want. Some people don't like new hire buddy because it sounds a little infantile. I get that. If you want to be new hire mentor, that's great too. There are ways to identify people on a team that are outside their management structure who could be there first day, who may be able to clear their schedule a little bit more flexibly and know that, hey, for the first week and especially for the first day, you're going to be this individual's point of contact. And that's what we've actually done here at Vivint, is that HR is involved. HR actually does give a piece of new hire orientation, but the people that they're meeting with are typically people on their team, and they have a new hire mentor that is bringing them around and is at the end of each of the meetings that they're supposed to be in. So they meet them on their first day, help them take their badge picture. Then they'll be the ones that actually escort them to the room where a new hire orientation will be if they're doing it in office. If they're doing it virtually, it's obviously a little different, but then, from there, they'll be outside after new hire orientation is done to then take them to where they go next, because a lot of those new hires then kind of deviate into their various scopes and perspectives. And so involving the business is critical, and especially if that's what you're trying to build. If you want an inclusive environment where people aren't feeling that like HR runs the show, and that, new hire orientation is exclusively an HR thing, then that's what you want to push in your organization, which I think I'm a big advocate for. I think HR should be melded and blended into the business. It shouldn't be these distinct categories for HR. Then that's the path I would go. Have a new hire mentor for that individual on their first day. Let them walk around with them, but have HR be present and be there and know that they're that person's respective HR contact in case they do need anything related to those things. But I'd get the business involved, and I would say it's maybe 25% of HR's responsibility, with 75% spread across the business between hiring managers and either people who are organizers, project managers, office assistants, executive assistants, whatever that may be, leaning in and having other parts of the business action and be a part of the process.
Love that. Lotus, what would you add to this? What is that breakdown on the first day between HR face-to-face time and FaceTime with your actual team? Brandon's throwing out 25-75 here, so that's a pretty bold, very, would you agree with that, or throw out a different percentage? I mean, let's get really specific here.
Well, I'm going to give you my typical MBA answer, and that would be it depends. But I do think that, so I've been in all size companies. I think that if you're a company that operates very much on site, if you're a bigger company, or if you're a smaller company that is scaling, meaning that you are hiring quite a bit, so you have bigger cohorts of new hires being oriented at the same time, that could look very different, right? In those cases, you get to do a little bit more of those fun things that you see, onboarding that you see at like a Google or an Apple, where we've spent, like I said earlier, a whole day with our new hires, or a whole week with our new hires. And then we also have leadership orientation if you're in a leadership role, where you get to Brandon's point, it's not an HR show, but HR does often plan it, but you bring in key stakeholders across the company. They present, they get to meet with the new hires. They have interactive activities that they do with them. And so in those cases, HR, I think, has a little bit more of a role to play and interaction in building that really inclusive environment for those types of companies. But, in smaller companies or virtual companies, I've very much been used to having to be creative, right? Like those opportunities to do some of the things you do in person aren't there. And so a lot of times the HR orientation is a lot smaller, and the new hires are spending the vast majority, probably Brandon's formula of 25-75%. They're spending most of that day in their department with their either their direct reports, their leader, their coworkers, key stakeholders, doing a lot of meet and greets. And so I think it really depends on the type of company and where they are. Like, even smaller companies, if you're scaling heavily, you probably want to start building more robust orientation programs. Whereas if you're just a smaller company, you're kind of status quo with your hiring, like you might not need to do that, because you can't plan huge group activities when you only have one new hire each time.
Yeah. Great point. Well, I think we hit on that pretty well. I want to jump now into the kind of the meat of this, which is, okay, what are they actually doing on the first day? What do you want to cover? And I think we've really probably mentioned everything already on and off throughout kind of these topics, but I want to just make sure we've really got a night, like if somebody's sitting at home taking notes and they want their own little checklist of things they want to be sure to cover. I want to have a moment together now where we just kind of make sure we have that all done. So Carol, I'll turn this one over to you, and then maybe we head back to Lotus, and then Brandon, if there's any other check marks you'd want to add. But what are the things you want to have covered in this?
So
Yeah.
make sure that all of their tech is set up so they understand how to use it, that they've had at least some exposure or training with your IT department, so they understand how to get connected, especially if you are an organization where that's primarily how you do your work. And make sure that they don't need to have the big grand tour maybe on day one. That can be overwhelming, but make sure they know where the break room and the bathrooms are and that they have some type of floor plan to know how to get back to their desk if they get lost. Because if you're in a big office, that is actually really nerve-wracking as a new hire to be lost and to not know anyone and to know where to go. And, HR does sit down with them on day one, even though we get the paperwork, the yucky stuff out of the way as much as possible before they start. We do sit down and we go over this first month checklist that it's like, here's a very high level overview of what you're going to experience over the next month. Take a deep breath. It's a lot, but we're going to leave lots of room in between all of these action items for you to just be. It's making sure that there's time for them to be able to take a breath on that first day and not try to jam pack like as much as you can into that time. But the essential things are tech, make sure they know where to go to the bathroom and where to get something to eat and, where they're sitting and how to get back to it.
Yeah.
The rest of the stuff is like,
I love that. It's like, that's what you need to survive right now.
yeah. Your team is great. HR is great. All that stuff is like super. But I mean, sometimes we can forget the most basic things because we're so involved in making sure we're so entrenched in like making sure that they get all of these things checked off. And we forget that we did not show them the bathroom. And they're like, can I have a bio break? That's hard.
I like it. Well, thanks, Carol. I mean, Lotus, Carol's kind of set off this basic checklist. Anything you would add to that?
First of all, I have to re-emphasize what Carol said about tech. Like, that is the biggest thing I hear about all the time. Yeah. If people don't have access to what they need to have access to on day one, it's just so frustrating for a new hire. So get that right.
And Lotus, really quick, can I interject here?
Yeah.
Let's talk more about that tech. Like, what do you mean by tech there?
So do they have a computer? Like, I've actually had a million times in my career, a new hire start and call me and say, I don't have a computer. What do I do? Like, all my work is on a computer. I don't even have a computer. Or they have a computer, but their login doesn't work. Or their manager tells them, go review all of these policies and these SOPs on the internet. And they don't have access to that. So it's anything, any software or hardware that an employee needs to do their job. And especially anything they need on day one. If that's not ready, it just looks so bad on us.
Can I draw a quick parallel here? So going back to the question about like how to determine when their first day is, honestly, internally, the most important department for us to consider is IT. It's especially during the pandemic when, all of these shortages started happening and things weren't available. It was like, they tell us when they can have the tech set up by, and that's how we determine when the start date can be, because that's critical. I agree with you. Number one complaint and source of pain point for people is getting here and not being able to do anything other than just stare at people.
Yeah. It's been number one complaint in every company.
Yeah, straight up. I think HR more than anybody else should have the most solid relationship with IT. I can't stress that enough. The previous organization I worked at, when I came on, their onboarding process was a mess and IT just wasn't included. And so we ran into the issues that Lotus talked about because we just neglected one of the most important partners in the whole entire process. And so we built a template, right? What is the most requested technology for every employee? So what does every employee get? And then from there, we were required managers to fill out a form about anything additional outside of the standard request the individuals needed. And that was all completed before first day. And that was done pretty quickly. And our IT team was more than happy to action on it. In fact, they loved it because they didn't have to fix anything first day because they knew that was going to be a busy day for them. And so I can't stress that point that Carol Ann and Lotus both have made, that like you've got to have technology. And the best way to do that is to have a really robust, strong relationship with your IT partners. And that's something you can develop. Sit down with them, ask them what they need, and they will love you forever.
And break down the bureaucracy. Like, I think companies, you know, as much as we try not to work in silos, we do. And there's a lot of bureaucracy that happens. Get leadership buy-in to break those down. So, as an example, a lot of ID departments, they operate on tickets and they have to because that's a way they measure their productivity. But like, get agreement that if they're like, we will fill out the right forms for onboarding, we will do all these things, but if something doesn't work for someone on day one, that HR has a direct line to IT. Like, I'm not filling out a ticket and waiting 3 days for you to get them their stuff to work on day one, right? Like, there needs to be some kind of escalation that doesn't include all of that red tape in order to get it done for people.
Super smart.
Um,
I just want
to your question, I also just wanted to say, you know, for one of the things that I like to do for day one as well, and sometimes you can have this conversation before the person actually starts, but I think everybody's kind of said it, one size doesn't fit all, and a lot of people operate very differently. Brandon's experience that he talked about for his memorable onboarding, like that would stress the heck out of some people, right? But he really enjoyed that experience. And so I like to have a conversation and actually learn a little bit about the person and see, you know, like what would stress them out on day one, and have kind of multiple plans that you can kind of go forward with where they have a little bit of an option and a say into what their first day looks like as well. Because I have that same experience. Like, I would be bored out of my mind if all you did was like give me the basics and a computer and say, take it easy. Like, I would twiddle my thumbs and go nuts on day one if I could jump in and start doing stuff. But for other people, it stressed them out. So really understanding your new hires, I think, is really important too, if you can kind of weave that in.
Yeah. And just real quick follow up there. Is that through just conversations with them through the interview process? Are you doing like a new hire questionnaire in addition?
Yeah. So when I was at a bigger company, I would do a questionnaire because we had so many new hires. But at a startup like I have now, it's just a conversation with the new hire.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Brandon, I want to kick it over to you to round off our checklist here. We got kind of into the IT world, and that was obviously really important. But anything else? I'm thinking like benefits. Are there any of those other kind of items that really need to be addressed in day one or not?
I think you can be flexible with benefits because typically there's like a window, right? An enrollment window. I think they definitely need to get it earlier on in the experience, but I don't know if you need to necessarily inundate people with that right away. I'll be honest. Unless you love benefits to everybody else is super boring. And on your first day, you want it to be exciting. You want it to be fun. So maybe that's something you table for like day 2 or day 3 when they're kind of getting into the nitty gritty. But for me, I got to stress this point again, and this comes from personal experience that Carol Ann brought up when she talked about food. It is important to set the precedent on whether you're providing lunch or they need to bring their own. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, am I supposed to bring something in? Where do I store that? What does that look like? Are we going to get lunch together as new hires? Like, what does that all look like? And setting that is so important. I'll be honest, the thing that most stresses me out with new hire orientations is where I'm going to eat, but that's because I eat a lot. And so for me, that's a critical piece, but it goes a long way and it shows care for people. So that's one thing I really want to stress because I've had experiences that haven't gone well with that. And then I starve all day because I didn't know what to expect. And I think first day lunches are incredibly important because it's a relaxed environment. Man, take your new hires out. Let them experience, lunch with you. Go do something, dote upon them a little bit. That goes a long way in establishing good relationships at the get-go. And then the last thing that I would just add to the checklist, and I think it's critically important, is to give the history of your organization. Give people the mission, give them the values, help them understand how they fit into the greater whole, that they're not just another cog in the machine, that they have a direct tie back to the mission. I think those are critical pieces and components because Vivint, for example, has a really rich history, and it's really exciting to see where they were and now where they are today. And that just excites people to see. And I think that applies for any company that we go to. We want to know where we came from and where we're going, and giving people that why of why we do the work that we do is really going to attach people to the organization that much quicker.
Yeah. This is great. I think we really got a good checklist going here. Lots of stuff people can do. Before I have one more question relating to kind of this list of things to do. Before I do, I just want to make sure I'm putting into the record a few thoughts from our audience here. So develop an onboarding plan. We talked about that, kind of the preparation phase. I displayed this for a little bit before, but they actually have a new hire brochure that gives key contact information, especially on IT and expense teams. It's been successful so far. And we had Rochelle comment in here on our feedback question, getting to know people. Surveys are a great way to gather feedback from a new hire's perspective. So very simple and easy to execute on.
Hey, Stephen, can I make a comment on Rochelle's? Something that we do here at Vivint that I actually love. We actually do a new hire meet and greet that's after their first week. And we do lunch with all the new hires again and bring them in, but we do it in their respective orgs. So if, for example, one of the organizations I support is called Innovation, it's one of our engineering groups. We do after their 7 days, their first full week, we do a lunch with them, and we have key leaders there. In fact, we actually have the chief product officer there, or sometimes the chief technology officer, and we just ask them, how's it been? How's your first day? Be honest with us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we've gotten more out of those conversations than just a questionnaire at times. We get surveyed out. HR, I think, experiences that more than anybody else. Is we take a lot of surveys. We do a lot of surveys, and they definitely have their time and their place. But man, just have a conversation with people and being intentional about setting up time for people to give feedback about their onboarding process. We've changed our onboarding process significantly because of those. And I think that is important. And once again, who doesn't love free food? People will talk when you provide them food. I can't stress that enough. It's amazing how food kind of loosens a little bit of people's vocal cords. And so doing that is also a great way for new hires to connect in the organization as well and talk about their specific experience.
Love it. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for some additional insights there. Going back to our first day checklist really briefly, Carol, I want to hear your thoughts on working on the first day. So obviously they're getting paid for the entire first day, but would you put work, and what I mean by that is like they're actually sitting down and digging into the responsibilities and getting started on a project or something. Would you put that as a priority on this checklist, like getting them to their team to start doing actual work, or what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to steal Lotus's MBA answer and say it depends, because it really does. I would say for, PCs, professional engineering consultants, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to start client billing, working on projects day one. There's way too much other information that has to be set up, and, standards that have to be gone over, and processes that have to be followed. I mean, this is work that has significant safety implications for the community if it's just done quickly without any type of process to it. So there's a few situations where that might make sense. There's probably a lot more than a few, but in this particular industry, not many. But I think that truly day one, like the why behind what you're trying to do it shouldn't be about how quickly can we get you to produce. And if you do push that production, and you think you're doing it for the right reason, you have to be really careful that you're communicating what that reason, and it's not because you value only their production. It's because you want to get them immediately as, connected to what they're going to be doing as possible, or, what I mean? Like, make sure that it's communicated if that's what you're doing, so that it doesn't feel like, man, all they want is for me to just flip burgers. And I was hired to do this one thing, and I don't really feel like it matters if it's me or some other guy off the street. So.
Perfect. Thanks, Carol. I think we've had a great conversation so far. That was kind of our last major topic, but we always like to give everyone one last opportunity to kind of drop their 2 cents, their last bits of wisdom to listeners. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that question now. We're going to have all of you answer this and share your final thoughts. But really, yeah, well, in a sentence or two, what would be your final piece of advice for people who are revisiting their processes and thinking, I want to make a really great first day? Lotus, if you could start us off, then we'll hop over to Brandon and finish with Carol.
I'd say make it fun. Don't just talk about compliance and policies and benefits. Make it interactive, incorporate activities where people can interact and get to know each other, create cohorts, that will stick together and engage those cohorts continuously so that every new hire feels like, if you're able to, I realize some companies have like one hire here and there, but if you're able to create cohorts, then people feel like they always have this little community that started with them that they can always go to when there's a stressful day or they need something that they're too embarrassed to ask, maybe someone on their own team. And also just remember and expect that you will need to repeat things because new hires are experiencing complete information overload. So one thing I always have to remind both my HR team, my hiring managers, everybody in the company, don't get frustrated with people, even in their first 3 to 6 months. Like, you will have to repeat things. And it's not because, they can't catch on or they're not competent enough. It's because they're experiencing information overload when they start.
Yeah. Have fun, be patient. Great advice. Brandon, over to you.
I mean, we've had a lot of great things that we've talked about. I think at the end of the day, it always boils down to show people that you care and that you care specifically about them, that you're not hurting people through, right? We're not live cattle that we're just trying to get through and make it through the day. You as an HR partner, you may do new hire orientation every week, and it may feel like the same thing that you say every single time. But to Lotus's point, mix it up, have fun with it, change some of the things that you share. But then also realize that even though you may have experienced doing new hire orientation 50 times at your company, for that new hire, it's their first time going through it. And I think that's just a critical piece, is showing people that you care and that you care about them specifically is going to go a long way on that first day to make it special, because how you go about that is going to be different for every single company, right? The MBA answer of it depends on the size and what your culture is and how you're going to do it. But as long as you're always thinking about how would I want my first day to be? And number two, I care about the individuals that are coming through the door on their first day. You're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to be doing new hire orientation just out of sheer care for people. And it's going to be a lot more fun, and you're going to build a lot more connections anyway, which is going to be a great thing.
Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. From Amy, really quick here, and then Carol will give you the last word. Start early and be flexible. Those are her words of advice. All right, Carol. Last mic drop moment from Carol here.
Okay. Yes. So I think that my advice would be value the quality more than the quantity of things that you're exposing them to and the experiences that you're giving them. Sometimes we just want to fit as much in, and we don't leave that breathing room, and we don't think about the way it's being experienced. But I read this book a few months ago called The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, and it changed I stayed up till 2 a.m. writing a whole new onboarding checklist because of this, because it's like, we have to create memories. We have to you have it. Of course you have it. It's such a good thing.
There you go. Little endorsement.
It's so
from the
good.
team
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Commercial break.
Yeah.
So, and what the part, I don't know if you remember the story about John Deere, but I literally took that step by step by step. And it was like, okay, this is how we want it to go. We want them to come in and we want them to have this, their name is on the board and there's a banner at their desk. So people know to stop by and say hi to them throughout the day. And they have lunch plans already from day one. You know what I mean? They have all of these little things, these moments are set up. One of those moments is going to be a memory that lasts and that impacts them, and they take with them for the rest of their life. So it's finding a way to create that memory and make it a good one. Quality.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Thank you three so much. I think we've learned a ton today. I always show this slide at the end. If you want to learn a little bit more and get some more details, go ahead and visit our encyclopedia. We have, I think, 20-something articles on onboarding as a topic in general. We do have an article specifically on the first day, which is where this conversation will be posted. And really the most beneficial thing you could do, go connect with these panelists on LinkedIn. You can see their member profiles at that link. But they're amazing people, very generous and smart, as you've seen. And we're just really grateful for them. So thank you three so much for being a part of this. Always appreciate these conversations. We hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.